50 years ago today, October the 18th, 1972, the federal law known as the Clean Water Act was enacted. The Clean Water Act established the basic structure for regulating pollutant discharges into the waters of the United States and gave the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, established just 2 years earlier in 1970, the authority to implement pollution control programs. What was the regulatory environment like pre-1972 when it came to water pollution?
Pre-1972, I think the best example that anybody could look at is a video that Orsenko did, Crisis on the Canal.
You know, when you get down below Charleston, the canal was really a mess. It actually stinks.
I don't see why they can't clean it up. After all, they have enough brains to figure out how to make those new detergents and those fancy plastics. Why can't they figure out a way to clean up their water instead of dumping all that stuff back into the canal? It's a disgrace.
Crisis on the Canal, a documentary film by Stuart Finley, was produced in 1962.
Water pollution was absolutely prevalent. There really weren't any water quality standards. There was no permitting environment to be found. So basically everything just was discharged out to public waterways.
Well, before the Clean Water Act, things were a mess. I mean, we had the one that gets all the press is the fire in Ohio, the Cuyahoga River, but the Potomac River was just a mess, and we just didn't take care of our water resources.
The Cuyahoga River in Cleveland at that time was one of the most polluted rivers in the country, actually catching fire at least 13 times between 1868 and 1969. The 1969 fire, although relatively small, caught the attention of the national media and brought the problem of unregulated water pollution into the national consciousness.
The Clean Water Act provided a vehicle with a lot more teeth. Permit systems came into play. Just prior to the Clean Water Act, the EPA started, and it gave the EPA more authority to regulate, and it became a tool for growth and scientific improvement. And as a result, people were forced to do the right things, and they continue to do the right things now, sort of on their own. It provided a vehicle for public involvement, which is critical, and just the format and the regulatory structure of it made it so that it was a lot easier to work with and grow with. So it's done enormous things for our country and our water resources.
I think that was a monumental piece of legislation that was passed, and where the federal government really recognized the need for protecting and cleaning up and preserving the nation's waterways. So the Clean Water Act essentially is trying to make our rivers and streams swimmable, fishable, and drinkable. And so we've met various goals in the Clean Water Act, and so I think the 50th anniversary is a great time to celebrate what we have achieved, but also recognizing that we have a long way to go.
The Act has been amended and modified several times over the last 50 years. The basis for the Act dates all the way back to 1948 with the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. The Clean Water Act of 1972 significantly reorganized and expanded the original 1948 law. Fundamentally, the Clean Water Act makes it unlawful to discharge any pollutant from a point source into navigable waters without a permit.
It was the game changer for everything. I mean, with the Clean Water Act, it created the NPDES permitting program, which regulates all water quality discharges. It created a grants program for the construction grants program to provide grant funding to our municipalities to build wastewater treatment systems. At that point, there really was no standards for wastewater treatment. It was straight piped or at best primary treatment. That grant program has now subsequently morphed into our Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund program. Since that point in time, we also have the state ability to set water quality standards. So the passage of the Clean Water Act was the game changer.
One of the biggest contributors to water pollution today is what's called non-point source pollution. As opposed to point source pollution, non-point source includes many diffuse sources, pollutants carried from the surface into a body of water through stormwater runoff or snowmelt. Things like oil or grease from roadways and parking lots, excess fertilizer, herbicides, and insecticides from farm fields, sediment from erosion, and bacteria and nutrients from livestock, pet wastes, and faulty septic systems.
Somebody spilled something on because their oil pan was leaking. It rains, it goes into the creek. Cattle run around in fields and they poop, and it runs off and goes to the creek. These things are not regulated. It's everyday activities, and that's the problem now that we have. The things that are not regulated and just associated with normal everyday behavior. And so that's what we do in the non-point source program, is try to work with people to correct those issues. We also have long-standing issues of acid mine drainage from polluted coal mines that are abandoned, and so we have those issues as well. But the non-regulatory part is the things we're going to have to deal with in the next 50 years.
Are you optimistic?
Yes, I think you have to be optimistic when you work in a field like this. Yeah, I think that we, like I said, have come a long way in recognizing the work that needs to be done, and kind of this last 50 years we've figured out what goals are attainable, what strategies work to achieve these goals, and so hopefully we can hone in over that over the course of the next 50 years to achieve even more of our targets that we set for ourselves.
Well, we've definitely come a very long way in 50 years. I can remember as a child going to visit my grandmother who lived over on Little Coal River. We went over there for Sunday dinner, and I was really interested in the river and fishing. And I remember that you couldn't even see the bottom of the river because it was just murky and gray and polluted, and there weren't any fish. And in the last 50 years, I've watched the Coal River come back and become a really good little fishery. And we catch fish, and we see a wide variety of fish. And I think, that's a really uplifting feeling to realize that the river that I used to be so disappointed by is now a really beautiful stream with clear water and a fish population.
Even before the Clean Water Act, there was a program the Isaac Walton League started called Save Our Streams, which we have here in West Virginia, and it encouraged people to get out in the creek and see things for themselves. And that outcry, along with teachers and the public, universities, and just everybody, really started this movement. So the public involvement is critical, I believe. And as long as the outreach and education continues, things will continue to improve.
There's always new challenges to be faced. Some are challenges that have existed since the passage of the Clean Water Act, and then we have new challenges like communities still without access to wastewater treatment. Trying to cross that affordability gap is a very big issue in West Virginia and across the country. We're still faced with those challenges. Still have nutrient issues, harmful algal blooms popping up that we are trying to address, and new challenges like PFAS, I think most people are aware of now, trying to get our hands around water quality standards and treatment technologies to address new pollutants of concern.
I think that we can all play a role in protecting water and recognizing that no matter where we live, we are in a watershed, and so what we do to the land does impact our waterways, and just keeping that in mind as we move through our life and move through these spaces.
I just hope that the people that hear this get the message and get inspired to think about what they can do to help us keep our streams clean and our water drinkable. We can all do something to make it better if we just keep in mind that we are the source of the problem, and we can be the source of the solution as well.